Ready. Good evening, everyone. How are you all? This is Enrique Sanchez, founder and director of Spanish United and Spanish United Radio. Tonight we have a special guest on the show. Would you be kind enough to introduce us to the audience, please?
I missed that part.
I said, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely. TJ Johnson, formerly the Thorlacksson clan of Iceland.
Awesome. Welcome for being on the show, TJ.
No problem.
Yes, as we had spoken over the phone, one of our, what piques our interest in Spanish United is the Icelandic community in the United States. Not too many people in Spanish United or Latin America know about Iceland. So would you explain a little bit about what your organization does, the history of the Icelandic community in America, and Icelandic Hispanic relations?
Well, sure. I'm based in Duluth, Minnesota, and a tremendous number of Icelanders came to America through Duluth, and many of them settled in Mankato and the Marshall area. Look those up on Google Maps. But they came for the same reasons why a lot of Irish people came. There were hardships in Iceland in the late 1800s, and my heritage comes from an area called Akureyri, which is the central northern part of Iceland. And they came here. Now, one of the traditions they had in Iceland was, since they're a seafaring nation, the men went out during the day to go to the sea, and the women would stay and quilt and do the things they needed to do in a house. They were known as the Hekla group. Hekla is a mountain.
Uh-huh.
And that was in the late 1800s, but
Uh-huh.
and they carried on the tradition of women gathering to just keep up with what's going on. Because men weren't allowed in, which was kind of unusual because there were a lot of women organizations in the early 1800s. There were lots of male-only organizations in America, but this was a female-only. So in the 60s, they started the Icelandic Association in Minnesota, which I'm a part of, and that was for men and women. And only 2 years ago did they merge. So now there's only one. But how in depth do you want me to go with how Iceland had an impact in the United States? I can certainly talk about that if you like.
Oh yeah, if you could explain how Icelanders have made an impact in the United States or their influence, that would be great.
Well, they're just now realizing that Leif Erikson came to the United States or the North America continent about 500 years before Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
And in Duluth, we have a replica of the Leif Erikson ship that he used to travel over here. They sort of plotted around. He would have gone from Iceland to Greenland to, upper Canada, what is now Canada, and then came down into here. And that's why he came to Duluth. So a lot of people don't know that. So now it's kind of a new thing that Columbus didn't really discover America, and Icelander did, which is fun. There's a lot of Icelanders that had really good jobs. My grandfather was one of them. He was the grandson of Johann Thorlacksson, which is why we're from the Thorlacksson clan. And he, in 1928, started working for General Mills. And General Mills at the time just did flour. And when he started there, they needed to do things. He was actually one of the people on the research team that helped create Bisquick and Betty Crocker cake mixes and things. So, there's about 50 or 80 Icelanders that had really darn good jobs like that. They were part of the Industrial Revolution in northern England. A lot of Icelanders didn't go outside of Minnesota. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but most of them stayed down in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because okay, yeah. That's pretty amazing because What I know about Iceland since I was a kid is that it was an island that used to be part of Denmark at one point, and it wasn't until, during the Second World War where it was granted independence from the Danish crown, and then it became a republic, and then it was a founding member of NATO. But it's always been like an isolated country, even with continental Europe, because not too many people know of Iceland, and there's not too many immigrants there. So from what I've heard, and again, correct me if I'm wrong. At one point, Iceland was one of the most homogeneous places in the world. So they tended to be very suspicious and not welcoming of outsiders. So do you think that has changed today? Hello?
There, you still there?
Yes, yes, I'm right here.
Okay, sorry. I think we disconnected when I got close to the house here.
Oh, okay, I hear you nice and perfect now.
Good, thanks.
Did you get anything what I just said right now?
Yeah, we were talking about Denmark, and I don't remember that far back in the history as far as the connection to Denmark, but over the centuries, I know the Huns took over at one point, and the Vikings, which aren't actually Icelandic, they came from a different area, but they took over at one point, and so Iceland has it's had a lot of different people in it.
Right, right. No, what I was saying, I'm not sure if we got cut off or not, is that what I remember when I was a kid is that Iceland was a country that was in the North Atlantic, even though it is European, it tended to be isolated from the rest of Europe because of its remoteness. And at one point, Iceland used to be very homogeneous, where they were not very open to outsiders. So my question is, has that changed? Has that changed today? That was my question.
Oh, yeah, it has changed quite a bit. It's a humongous tourism site for they got the tons and tons of hot springs. I don't know if people know, but most homes in Iceland are heated with geothermal. They just
Yes.
dig pipes in the ground, and there's so much volcanic activity that that's what heats homes and stuff. But it's not as cold there as you would think since they're so far north. But no, they
Right.
love tourism out there. They've got all kinds of things set up for it. And one of the projects I've been working on is to bring more tourism uh, from the U.S. over to Iceland, because
Hmm.
the interest in Iceland is increasing dramatically lately.
Hmm. So how would you describe Icelandic Hispanic relations in the United States, or let's say between Iceland and Latin America?
In the 15 years I've been part of the association, I guess I've never really heard of any connection at all. But Icelanders are very quiet. I think you were just saying that they don't really normally like a lot of visitors, so they're not much for mixing with. I guess that's not the right term. I mean, I guess they don't really notice things. They don't really pay attention. They just kind of do their thing.
Hmm. Yeah, I asked because many people, in Latin America, have spoken about having better relations with Iceland because it could be a market for different products. As you know, Latin America is an emerging region. And what role do you think Iceland could play in Latin America's development?
Well, I work with the consulate general here in Minnesota, um, on and off, and as they've gotten out of that economic disaster they were in the last 10 years with the banking problem they had,
Yes.
they have become more and more open to, all kinds of industries and things. So I do know they're looking, and they'll talk to most anybody about what they could do to build it, because they're understanding the power of tourism. It's kind of weird because I'm 60 years old, and when I was a kid, there was travel, but there wasn't anywhere near as much travel as there is now. So
Hmm.
we're a much smaller world, and so I would say that people that are in Latin America would have a better chance than others because it's something unique that you normally wouldn't find in Iceland, and that's what they're looking for, is to bring unique things in.
Hmm. Yeah, because one of our goals of Spanish United is, apart from spreading awareness of Hispanic experience, but at the same time to build economic, academic, and cultural links with other countries. And I feel that Iceland, especially with Hispanics, I think that will give them a more of a unique perspective of how Latin Americans are seen. Because one of the stereotypes that people have of Latin Americans, that they're predominantly a third world people. So, one of the things that we do in Spanish United is try to dispel that, and we try to encourage Hispanics to learn about other societies and for other societies to know about Hispanic people, because I feel that can help in reducing tension. At the same time, there could be an exchange and open dialogue. So I think that's something that I would like to see with the Icelandic community, especially that they have been stereotyped by other people for being, like you mentioned earlier, they tend to be isolated and tend not to be open towards others.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and what's nice about it is Iceland is small enough. People always say you live in a small neighborhood, you know everybody.
Right.
Well, it's that Iceland's kind of that way in the form of a country, whereas everybody knows everybody. That thing. I'm sure they don't actually know everybody, but they do want to keep tabs on their roots. They're very strong about their heritage. I'm very strong about the heritage, and I've been working along to try and get the Icelanders to kind of turn back and join as a group. So it's nice that there's an organization like yours that is working on keeping a community together, supporting each other, and not forgetting, where we're from and where our roots are. There's too much of that disappearing nowadays.
Yes, and especially the Hispanic people above any other group are being targeted primarily because of the political climate and immigration. There is a pressure for Hispanic people to assimilate and to give up their culture and give up their language. And many Hispanics are afraid to even identify as Hispanic because of the Hispanophobia that's going around. So, I'm trying to encourage Hispanic people, especially the Hispanic youth, to they could be part of America and be American, but it doesn't mean that they need to forget about where they came from. So, we're trying to do what we can to encourage education and language courses and to be connected with the roots. Like right now, we're in the process of trying to get a community center, because in many Hispanic communities throughout the United States, they don't have too many community centers for their people. So we're trying to do that so that way they could have a place to learn and grow. At the same time, they could have a safe place.
Yeah, I think that's what I've been trying to accomplish over the last 7-8 years with the organization is how do we not make a big stink about being different, but to try and say that to emphasize our good qualities and where we come from without being pretentious about it, I guess is the best word.
Okay.
Because you can't forget where you come from.
No, of course not. Absolutely.
Most people do, though.
Well, I know, and especially a lot of has to do with assimilation, and and that's the thing that I'm seeing within many Hispanic communities, that dependent on what they look like on the outside, many of them are either forced to assimilate into Caucasian culture or into African American culture. So we're trying to combat against that.
Exactly. And like I said, it's weird because we're going into an age of that everybody is, I guess I don't want to get too far down the road of pronouns and all these no gender thing, but I think I hope we don't continue down that road, because it's not a matter of, there's an old phrase that says, if you forget the past, you're doomed to repeat it. But there's a lot to be said alongside that, which is if you forget, who you are, you don't do as well. And that's what I think is happening as people, they don't even call themselves Americans or Latin Americans. They're just, they're just people. Right. And then it doesn't give you a focus or a direction in your life. And I think that's what makes life much more interesting, is to feel you're carrying on a legacy, or that you're doing something to impact others, of your own origin, and others. And that's, to me, it's always made life a lot more interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Every individual or community has their own unique history, customs, traditions, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong in trying to preserve them. I do believe that there should be tolerance, that we may have our differences, but it's we are within our rights to try to preserve those and have a mutual understanding of one another. I think society would be much more better off.
Yep. I mean, that's how America started, We're a bunch of cultures that came together for all kinds of different reasons. And we should be proud to be Americans because that's what this country is all about, what made it great.
Right.
But we want to always remember our particular contribution to that. And that's what I hope, can grow in the future as opposed to making everything androgynous and, nothing has any meaning.
Right,
And,
right.
Being an Icelander doesn't make me better than anybody. It just gives me different qualities that help make this country great.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. And the same thing with being a Hispanic. I think being Hispanic doesn't make me beneath anyone, but I believe, as someone that comes from a working class background, that I'm able to bring different perspectives, to American society.
Yep. And I think more people should do that, It's like I think too many people are trying to change the world to their way and say that, we're this particular culture or this particular background and we're better than everybody else. And you have to, change what you think just to accommodate us. And it's like, that's not what America is all about. It's the land
Right.
of opportunity, and it will continue to be, as a free economic, society. And that's where it gets kind of fun because, if you get the word out for anything, you talk about the products that Latin American people want to bring in, it's just a matter of marketing and bringing that specific brand forward, and people get excited about it. I mean, I work as a tax consultant and a business developer, and I work with people all day long trying to help them do that exact same thing. And that's what I'm trying to do with the consulate general with Iceland is to build different promotion platforms to bring people out to visit, Iceland. And we're at that point where we're trying to find out what makes Iceland so special and bring that as opposed to just going to the main tourist attractions, but
Right.
to make it a big trip there that would be culturally significant. And I think more cultures should do that and say, like we're from Latin America and these are the particular countries we're from. And let's start building some tours there to kind of show people what makes them special and what makes them different and a good mix for our country. And I think that's a good start for the future.
Yes, I believe that, one thing I would recommend is that try to set up tours with people in Latin America or even among Hispanic Americans in the United States. That would be a good way for them to learn and educate themselves more about Iceland. I think that would be a good start.
Well, like I think you probably have the same issues with your group that I do, and that is there's a lot of Icelanders that don't really understand what their culture is and what it means. They just know they're Icelandic. By the way, a good dead giveaway of anyone who's Icelandic is they will still have two S's in their last name.
Really?
Thorlacksson is spelled with two S's, and a lot of people don't know why. And it's because in Iceland you're named after your father. And
Mm.
so my great grandfather's father's name was Thorlak. And when he had a child and a son, he was known as Johann Thorlack's son, or the son of Thorlak. And that's why you can do genealogy very easy in Iceland, because you just follow the name right back and you know exactly who the dad was and everything. So that's kind of an interesting fact a lot of people don't know, but that's why there's two S's in all Icelandic last names.
So I wanted to ask a question concerning what you just mentioned right now. Would you say Iceland is culturally part of the Nordic Scandinavian countries, or is their language based on Old Norse? Because from what I've read of the Icelandic language is that even though it is a North Germanic language, it's kind of like unique in the sense that it's kind of like the old Norse language that the old Scandinavians used to speak at one point.
It's moved quite a ways away from that, but that is the origin of it. And it is extremely difficult for like me as an American born in this country to pronounce it. I've been learning a little bits here and there, but yeah, it's very difficult. It's not, you don't use your lips much. It's a lot of
Mm,
it's a lot of vowels. Like I said, my great grandfather was from Ulfadorfsen in Akereri, and
mm,
it's no lips movement. So it's it's grown from there, but they're very strong with it. They all know English, but that's spoken very broken. Even a lot of Icelanders that have lived here their whole lives have trouble pronouncing, English just because their mouth is used to pronouncing more vowels.
mhm.
So very hard language to learn.
Yeah, because when I was in Norway 2 years ago, I had a ex-fiance that was from there, and I thought Norwegian was a difficult language. I can imagine Icelandic is probably more difficult than Norwegian.
Yeah, we've had a couple conventions I've been to in Minnesota for the Icelandic communities, and they come in from Canada and everywhere, and many of them still speak Icelandic, and it all sounds like one big word. It's
Hmm.
not they're not broken up at all. So, but they flow very quickly, and I always think, well, I'm never going to learn Icelandic. I know that it's
Hmm.
too much to learn.
Hmm. And another thing that I also piqued my interest is the Parliament of the Althing of Iceland. Not too many people know that it's one of the oldest functioning parliaments in the world. That's been around since 900 and something.
Yep.
Are you familiar with the Althing and how they've been able to survive this long? Because not too many parliaments have lasted this long since that time.
Well, Iceland was very fussy about letting people in for hundreds of years, and in fact, it's a rumor, but it's actually true, and that it's Iceland that named Greenland, and they
Hmm.
named it. They told everybody about Greenland, so they would just move on and leave Iceland alone.
Hmm.
It's very true,
Yeah,
but
Iceland is green and Greenland is ice.
exactly, and they just wanted people to keep moving west. But that's why it has lasted so long, and it's a very simple governmental, like it's a tribal type structure, and it has just been very successful in promoting what they want. And because they don't get a lot of, have had a lot of foreigners come over there. Again, that's why genealogy is so easy in Iceland, because they haven't let a lot of people in. Nobody really wanted to go there because they thought it was all ice. And so they've been able to keep, them. It's kind of like one really big tribe. There still isn't tons of people that live there. And that's probably why the government and the political stuff has stayed so strong over the years, but it's very simplified.
Yes, yes. Because I remember a couple months ago there was a Nordic festival here in Thousand Oaks, and it was hosted by the Scandinavian American Association at California Lutheran University, and I was actually speaking with some guest speakers from Iceland. They were talking about some recent artifacts that were found in different parts of the world that were Vikings, and they were telling me that when the big volcanic eruption happened in this little town south of Iceland, many of these children had to go to different areas, and it was like a trauma for them because since they've been there all their lives, having to move from one area, and I'm talking about within the same country, not having to go or as a refugee outside the country for them was pretty traumatic. So that just shows how intertwined people are over there.
Yeah, and everybody, you pretty much know who everybody is based on their name because it's all based on the father's names. So I hope to go there one day and, kind of see if I can find the Thorlackssons, and the ancestry back that way. But that's a project for the future.
Hmm. And one more question to ask, before we conclude the interview, like as being part of the Icelandic community, like what would you like to see done differently for Hispanics and Icelanders in the United States to have more dialogue or have a better understanding of relationships with one another? Like what would you recommend, or how would you come about it?
Well, that's a difficult question because I mentioned earlier the Icelanders they kind of stick to Icelanders, but not in a segregating way. It's not like the Icelanders don't like other people or anything like that. It's they just have always been a seafaring nation, which kind of means they stick to themselves and they work together as their community, and they don't necessarily go out and try and put connections together. But a more broad answer would be I would like to see, Latin American and Icelandic and German and Irish and Scottish, you know, all these different cultures to work together and work on promoting all of each other, meaning to kind of re-emphasize that this is what makes America America, and we should all be working together to sort of remind everyone where America came from. And part of that should be that everybody should have a moment to say what makes them special and what they feel they contribute, to our world right now. And that would be something fun that the Icelanders could do with all kinds of different communities and cultures. And I think that would be a project that I wouldn't mind adding into our list of things to do, because most of what I've been doing is following what they've done in the past, which has been to have more Icelanders realize that they're Icelanders and feel proud of being an Icelander. And then from there, go on to say, let's start sharing that with other people. So that would be an interesting project to look at for the future.
Yeah, I could definitely, do my part. Like I said, Spanish United, we also reach out to different communities. Like for example, I have done interviews with the Danish community, with the Norwegian community, with the Swedish community, the Finnish community, and I'm very well familiar with the Nordic culture and peoples. And I feel that that would be a way that we could break the ice, and we can learn from one another, and that we're not really much different. We may have different needs, or we may have different customs that are obviously different, but we're all human in the sense that we all have basic needs to survive, and we have to learn to get along and to work with each other in order to survive.
Exactly. And I think that what we can do wrong is to either promote our individual cultures at the expense of the others would be wrong. And it would also be wrong to underemphasize it and just blend in and disappear. So there's a
Mhm.
fine line in the middle there. And I think if we find that right mix, it will bring back a lot of what made America great before. And now we're kind of getting sort of off on it, where there
Mhm.
is nothing out there, there's just, I don't know, we have no more races, we have no more genders, we have no more cultures, we just have, you know, people,
Mhm.
of
Right,
which
right,
may
of
not be
course.
any gender. So
Right.
we're going the
Well,
wrong direction, I think.
no, I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. Well, anyway, our podcast has concluded. I want to tell you, TJ, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for taking your time on Coming Spanish United Radio, and for your listeners of the Icelandic community of Minnesota. You can reach out to us on our social media platforms. We are on Spanish United YouTube, Spanish United Facebook, Twitter, now known as X, Instagram. Anyone that wants to know about us, could reach us through direct messages. I always respond back, and who is interested in donating to Spanish United, we are also on PayPal and Cash App. So as soon as I wrap this up, I will send the link, and you could share it with everyone that you feel that you want them to listen to.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Have yourself a wonderful evening.
You too. Thanks.